This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. This is a show about ideas, people, and behaviors that are considered inappropriate, out of bounds, or beyond the pale. The things you're not supposed to talk about if you're a school teacher, a college professor, a businessman, a politician, a parent, a neighbor, or even a podcast host. These are the things you're not supposed to say or even think if you're a good liberal, a good conservative, or a good citizen. Each week, I'll interview a person who has something bad to say. They might be a journalist or a professor. They might be a porn star or a drug dealer. They might just be an ordinary person with an ordinary job who doesn't care about the rules of polite society. I'm not interested in breaking the rules just to be a troublemaker. I'm interested in people who break the rules of conventional thought and to expand the scope of what is possible to say in our society. I'm interested in people who make me think.
There have been many questions about these people called Latinos lately. Some people say that they are taking over the country and destroying American civilization. Others say that they are vital to the success and vitality of the United States and that more of them should be let in. Others, like me, simply ask, what is a Latino? So, for this week, I asked a Mexican. This is my interview with Gustavo Arellano. I am joined from what I've been told is a P.O. box in Anaheim, California, in Orange County.
That's right.
That's where Gustavo Arellano has now been relegated to.
I hope they're capturing.
To live inside of a P.O. box. But he's here. He's the king of journalism of Orange County. Arguably the most arguably the most important journalist to come out of Orange County. Is there a competitor, by the way? Who's like another important journalist who's come out of OC?
It has to be my former colleague, R. Scott Moxley at the OC Weekly. He's the one who brought down Mike Corona, the former sheriff of Orange County, went after so many horrible cops. The district attorney, of course, Tony Rakakis, he is a true king of Orange County. Even though I was his boss for years, he was a true king. So respect to Moxley. And because sadly OC Weekly shut down, he's been unemployed ever since.
Oh no. Wow.
Yeah.
So you were on Unregistered, a while ago, at least 2 years ago, and you had just left the OC Weekly, right? I believe at that time. And we're going freelance. And when we were talking, you didn't know where you were going to go. You were pretty much up in the air. That would have been like 2018. I believe it's right before. Am I right? Right before you got the job at LA Times, where you are now?
Yeah. No, it's interesting because first and foremost, so many people have reached out to me because of being on that podcast. So your listener, you get stats on your listenership, but just know that it goes far further than you ever think. Like people who I never imagined would even be leaning towards like libertarian thought. Like they listen to you and they're like, oh man, I heard you. Or even friends of mine who I'm like, oh shit, I never thought of you as being somewhat libertarian. And they're like, yeah, no, I love, I love the show. I love everything that he puts out there or whatever. So just know that. But when that came out, I was actually thinking of starting my own thing. You actually predicted Gustavo's going to start his own thing. And would have done that if it wasn't for the fact that I got canceled, supposedly. So once I got canceled, this whole remezcla thing, after that, I just had to hustle my ass off to grab all this freelance shit. And I became a mega freelancer in 2018 to the point where the Los Angeles Times to me, and to quote The Godfather, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and more importantly, they've allowed me to do the stories that I want. So here I am, all these years later. But that said, the idea of, if not doing my full own thing, but definitely helping people and publishing things under my imprimatur, so to speak, I still do that. So on my website, I'll publish journalism every once in a while, just to, not only to help out my friends who need money right now, and I don't believe in just giving out money for free. You have to do a fucking story for me, so do that. But then that also allows them to get a clipping to hopefully get them to better places than just my website.
Cool. Excellent. All right. So yeah, you were in this this moment in between jobs. You started freelancing a lot. LA Times comes along. They make you an offer you can't refuse. When The Godfather comes, you answer the door, and now what's your formal title? What's your formal title? Are you a columnist, staff writer? What is it?
Yeah, no, I'm a columnist for the California section, and the way my internet biography says, I cover Southern California, everything, and a bunch of the West and beyond. And obviously, because of COVID, I'm not really traveling as much as I'd like to, but I'm looking for stories all around,
Okay.
not just about Latino stuff. I do like covering Latino stories. Obviously, we're like, what, fucking 50% of Southern California. So if we just played the demographics game, every other story of mine would have to feature a Latino. That's not how it works out usually. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So, but just, usual. Any story that tells us who we were, who we are, and who we're becoming as Californians. Especially, I like to tell stories that tell you stuff that that you never really thought about until I told you, and then you're like, oh yeah, it's there. Like, it's something to think about for sure.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, your stories, I just went through your whole oeuvre at the LA Times, all of your columns that you've written there. And it's only been, as a columnist, it's been a few months, but you're very prolific. So yeah, it's
I try.
But every story I think is a Southern California story. Most of them are, not all, but most are Latino California stories, but every single one of them is of national importance. Every single one has,
Thank you.
You're dealing with issues that are nationally and internationally important. Well, you know that. I mean, I think it's part why you're interested in those stories, is that they're bigger than just this thing, right? So, like, you told this great, and me, you've been following me on Twitter. You see what a horrible human being I am, and how little I care for people suffering under COVID, and that I just want your grandmother to die really badly.
You're just not wearing that mask walking through Michigan, and someone's screaming at you because you and your wife are like 50 feet away from it, or your partner is 50 feet away from everyone, and how dare you not wear a mask outside?
Oh, you read that tweet? Yeah, that's right. Someone actually did.
Dude, I follow you. I read your shit.
That was actually in Marin, dude. That was in Marin County. It was like crazy. It was crazy.
Okay.
But yes.
I knew it was an M.
Yeah, right. So I'm just like up to here with the masks and all that and the lockdowns. But you told a story about a store in near USC, I believe, right? That had to be shut down. And the patriarch of the family and the owner of the store was hospitalized with COVID. I believe is still hospitalized and he's been hospitalized for months. And it's a wrenching story I previously would have said, yeah, the lockdown is the problem there because that's what made them close the store, which is true, at least to some extent. But he also got COVID in a really bad way that he had to be hospitalized. And, it's a typical immigrant family, struggling as entrepreneurial small business people who are like my heroes. Those are my heroes.
Yeah.
And I hate it when anything bad happens to them. Those are my people. I mean, that's who I want to protect more than anyone. I think they're absolutely essential to this society. And they bring so much good in my life. That it made me be a little less, I guess you could say, callous, I suppose, about wearing masks, although I'm still not at all convinced that they do anything. But I guess I am sympathetic to similar to like the immediate post-Trump era, like that first 6 months after he was elected when everyone was sure he was going to round up all the immigrants and throw them into concentration camps before he liquidated them or something. Which, and he did like a version of that, most certainly, but it was nowhere near what we thought. But nonetheless, and I knew he wasn't a Nazi. I thought he was terrible on immigration, but I knew he wasn't a Nazi, and then he probably wouldn't be much worse than Obama. And in fact, he's a little bit better than Obama, believe it or not. But in terms of numbers,
but don't talk about numbers. You can't do that.
I know that really upsets people. It hurts. Numbers hurts. They hurt feelings apparently. But I remember like just feeling nonetheless like the fear that must have been going on among like especially the undocumented communities. I mean, must have been incredible, and I had tremendous respect for that even though I thought it was not necessarily going to be true. But nonetheless, there was a new crackdown. And anyway, I just, it's kind of Gustavo Arellano at his best. Like, it's giving me a window into that world that I really care about as an outsider and as a beneficiary of immigration. And let me say, a beneficiary of illegal goddamn immigration too. To me, if you're in an illegal, that's a compliment. That's a badge of honor. Right.
Well, look, the very first, when illegal immigration, the term illegals first came into the American English, we weren't even talking about Mexican immigrants or Chinese immigrants. Literally, we were talking about Jews smuggling themselves into Palestine to be able to create the state of Israel. And so when we talked, there was a documentary called The Illegals. That was the name of the documentary in the 1950s, maybe the 40s, The Illegals. And we celebrated those illegals back then. We celebrated those illegals when they were Jews going into Palestine. But the minute they turn into a different shade of brown, like Mexicans, like, Salvadorans or anything, that's when we demonize them. That's when they're no longer hero, but vermin and scum that need to be taken out. So years ago, and I, at this point, I don't think I'll write about it anymore just because I've written about it so much. I mean, this is my 20th year in journalism, which is amazing in its own way. But years ago, for the Times, was it for the Times? Yeah, no, it was for the Times. I wrote an article, a column, talking about how I was proud that my dad came to this country in the trunk of a Chevy. That my dad did the worst possible way imaginable to come into this country, which is 18 years old, being in the trunk of a Chevy with two other guys, and then coming up. And that was the first time he came here as an illegal. And it's funny because that generation of Mexicanos, of undocumented folks, they still call themselves mojados, wetbacks. Like, there was a term of pride. Yeah. They took pride in coming into this country under the gabachos, every which way but loose. There was nothing shameful from that. There's a famous corrido called Vivan los Mojados, long live the wetbacks. I think it was Los Alegres de Terán that first played it, but Los Tigres del Norte made a cover version of it as well. And they talk all about, we're coming in as wetbacks, and the best thing for us to do is we marry a white girl, then we get our green papers, and then we divorce them, and then we go off. Like, and you hear that, there's this joy in that you do not see anymore. And I think that's a bad thing, by the way. Now, when we talk about, well, you can't call those folks illegal immigrants anymore. You have to call them undocumented, which is such a bureaucratic term. And look, I get it. People say no human being is illegal. They'll say that. But then I would always rejoin them with another a Chicano punk band called Los Crudos that used to be in Chicago. There was hardcore punk, so 15-second songs of pure fear. They had a song called Ilegal y qué? Illegal and what of it? And that's how I've always seen this, Boom. It's like, yeah. And I'm thank you as a white man, as a gabacho, for loving illegals, because everyone should love Los Mojados. Everyone. I love people who break laws I don't believe in. That's it. That's all it is. Go. Like, I think there should be no laws governing the border whatsoever. I think there should be no border, period. And so if you're breaking and that's one of the most important laws to me that I want to overturn. So if you break that law, you're a hero. You're a hero. Yeah, and not only that, like, we lionize illegals in American society. Look at the state of Oklahoma. Sooners? What is the whole Sooner mythology? We came in before we were supposed to, because that shows American pluck. So it's okay if you're a boomer Sooner, but if you're not, not if you're some Mexican or Salvadorian kid trying to come to make a better life for yourself. And right. I knew this, by the way, even before I got, politically active or whatever. I just have never liked hypocrisy. And to me, American hypocrisy is a special kind of hypocrisy. Oh, yeah. We're good at it. We're good at it because, well, for a lot of reasons, but one of them is that we're just utterly ignorant about politics. The other is that we have this formal culture. I don't mean popular culture, but the formal culture that's taught in the schools that politicians talk about, like how we should behave and live, is basically impossible to live up to. We can't, they want us to be like Puritans from the, 17th century in New England. And then of course they break their own rules right and left. But so there's a hypocrisy constantly, because Americans will go to church, and then after church they go to the liquor store. And that's kind of how it works. And always has been. So
because we've set such impossible standards for ourselves, formally, uh, and then at the same time we have this incredibly robust commercial consumer capitalism engine that's just pumping out hedonism all the time, right? So we're just caught between these two worlds of this puritanical stuff that the bosses and the government officials and the generals and the media and the teachers tell us, right? And then on the other hand, we've got nothing but like chicks in bikinis and Jack Daniels and
and they accuse us Mexican Catholics of having a Madonna whore complex. Come on, America, you guys are worse at it than us.
Really? Did they say that you have it exclusively? You're the only ones? Are you invented it or something?
It's the Black legend. It really. I've long maintained that the whole reason why Mexicans, Latinos in general, but specifically Mexicans, are as despised as they are. This is a fucking rivalry that goes back to Elizabethan England, when the Spanish Armada was trying to take over, trying to invade England. And of course, Sir Francis Drake blows them all to smithereens. But that idea of the Black legend, that anything the Spaniards touch is doomed and is basically rotten to its core. Because you think of like two completely, at least if you think of historical American culture, the way America has always tried to define itself, you have America, which is English, Protestant, and they speak the English language, versus Spaniard, which is going to be Spanish, not white, Catholic, and speaks Spanish. That whole rivalry goes into Latin America and really defines a lot of the Monroe Doctrine, good neighbors policy, everything. It all goes. That is my grand conspiracy theory. QAnon has nothing on that conspiracy theory except mine is true.
Oh. You're explaining like the history of U.S. foreign policy vis-a-vis Latin America, right? You're explaining the cause of essentially U.S. imperialism in Latin America. And you're saying, am I right, that at the root of it is that kind of, it's not exactly racism, although it certainly could be and has been racism at times, but it's sort of just it's an anti-Catholicism. It's anti-brown. It's
racism. No, I mean it's racism mixed with. I mean you have this foundational moment, which is you have what's going on in Europe in the 1500s. You have Spain trying to become an imperial power, already taking over the Americas. Now trying to go into England, and England's like, nah. They save themselves, and then they're like, "Oh wait, these Spaniards, they're not as tough as they make themselves out to be. Let's really start getting into this imperialism game." And that has so informed American foreign policy towards Latin America. It really is at the root of it, and it's like that was the Big Bang moment, the Spanish Armada, and it's so much informed so much of what we have today.
Yeah, I mean, they thought of just before the 1898 Spanish-American War, right? The language about the Spaniards was that they were monsters, beasts, rapists. And, you could certainly say it was racialized language. I don't know if they made that explicit, but it sure sounded like racialized language. And then you had Albert Beveridge, the great senator from Indiana, who was like the arch imperialist of the time, and Teddy Kennedy, both saying things that were completely racial, racist. It was the Anglo-Saxonism. That was actually their ideology. Really, it was Anglo-Saxonism more than anything else, more than capitalism, more than democracy. It was They believed that Anglo-Saxons, like themselves, were obligated to uplift the non-Anglo-Saxons of the world. And the further you were from a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, the more you needed the Navy to come save you. So whether you were in the Philippines or in Cuba or Guam or then later on other countries, but you're right. I know this because I'm writing a book about this. I'm writing about the history of U.S. foreign relations, and I've done a lot on the Spanish-American War. And there was a whole bunch of racializing of Latin Americans. And this, let's talk about this for a second. This just cracks me the fuck up. The racialization of Asians, I think, is the only one that's more absurd, but the racialization of Latin Americans is right up there. I've been wanting to tell you this story for a while. About a year ago, I met and hung out with a young guy. I grew up in my hometown, Berkeley. He's much younger than me, and one of his parents is Nicaraguan and the other is Costa Rican. And it was just great. We started talking about like how absurd it is to like lump all these different people into a race. And and he did an imitation of the accent of all the countries of Central America, including from Mexico and then all the Central American countries. So he did the Mexican accent, and I realized it's very theatrical and like sing-songy. I didn't even realize that. And he did it perfectly. And then he did the Nicaraguan accent, which is just very serious. I can't do it in Spanish, but he's like very serious. I didn't know this about Nicaraguans. Very serious, very political, not fun, like really stern. And they did Costa Rica, and it was like in Spanish, it was basically like California surfer dude kind of vibe.
Pura vida, man. Pura vida.
Yeah. And it was just so, it was simultaneously the funniest thing I've ever seen. And I learned a whole lot, and it just kind of crystallized in my mind just the absurdity of race, in particular, the way it's applied to Latin America, right? You see this thing over my shoulder here? Oh, that shoulder. Christmas tree. What would be a better gift than Paloma Verde CBD for your loved ones? Especially when you're getting 25% off every single product in the store, but there's more than that. You get another 10% off by joining the mailing list of Paloma Verde CBD. Just go to palomaverdestore.com, use the discount code RENEGADE. Again, you get 25% off every single CBD product, and I use them all the time. I swear by these products, every single one of them. If you're a new customer, join their mailing list. That's another 10% off, so that's 35% off your first order. Also, the number one selling product or package of products at Paloma Verde is my 3 favorite things that they sell, all brought together in what's called the Unregistered Combo Pack, also known as the THAD Pack. You get their wonderful gummies, which taste like delicious candy, but have 10 milligrams of CBD in each gummy. I eat them like crazy, probably too much. Their soft gels. 25 milligrams of CBD per soft gel. I use 2 to 6 per day, depending on what's going on in the world and what's going on in here in my head. And then also my very favorite thing, their high potency tincture, which I put a few drops under my tongue, and I tell you, it just changes my mood, my outlook, and my tension and stress reduce almost immediately. So go to palomaverdestore.com, use the discount code RENEGADE, get 25% off everything in the store, 10% off additionally if you join their mailing list, so that'd be 35% off your first order. The combo pack, the unregistered combo pack, otherwise known as the THAD pack, that is 33% off. Get that for your loved ones. Oops, wrong shoulder again. That Christmas tree for the holidays or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever you want. Just buy it. Make your life better. Make your friends and family's lives better. And I thank you. You know, these people hate each other.
I mean, you don't even have to go to Latin America. Just stick in Mexico. Like one of the interesting things, there's this big show right now on Netflix called the Taco Chronicles. It's the second season. I come out in 2 episodes. Of course, hello, I wrote the book on fucking Mexican food in the United States. I better be on that show.
Damn straight.
And so I'm in the burrito episode and in the American taco episode.
Huh.
And one of the cool things about the show, besides, showing how to, the people who are making the best food on earth are all entrepreneurs, all working class, all fucking hustling like nonstop. But every episode has a different accent from Mexico. So in the burritos episode, it's an accent from northern Mexico. And historically, the people from northern Mexico, that was PAN territory. PAN being the conservative party of Mexico, because the north was far more entrepreneurial, far more conservative, far more Catholic. They imagined themselves to be whiter, whether that was true or not, that's a whole other story. Than the rest of, say, like southern Mexico. Once you get into like Oaxaca, Chiapas, that's where all Guerrero, that's where all the Marxist revolutionaries set up camp, because those folks are indigenous. Those folks have more like, clan-based societies where Marxism and socialism is going to have more of a chance to be able to, to bear fruit, so to speak. So when people try to lump in Latinos as like this monolithic race, it's like, dude, first of all the countries hate each other. And then within the countries, we all hate each other as well. Like, and I always tell the story, my mom, may she rest in peace, like from Mexico, from central Mexico, Zacatecas, I'm sure we'll talk about Zacatecas later on, but people from Zacatecas, very, I don't want to say entrepreneurial, because I can't really, I had some aunts and uncles who started their own businesses, but more than anything, we're just hustlers. We work, we make no excuses. They came up in Orange County like in the 60s and 70s. That's when we were mostly in the trade, or like in the unions, the trade unions and all that. By the 80s and 90s, you start seeing people from Michoacan. And the state of Michoacan, it's a huge state on the Pacific coast, but also in mountains. Like if I had to compare Michoacan to a part in the United States, I'd compare it to like the Ozarks. So we're talking about mountain people, kind of a little bit crazy, very diverse in their own culture, very, very proud people. And of course, the rest of the white people around the Ozarks looks down on the Ozarks. Bunch of fucking hillbillies, give all the vices to them. Well, that's how my mom was. She's like, oh, Mexicans, they're not the same anymore because they're coming from Michoacan now. I'm like, mommy, like, they're still Mexicans, and they're saying you're saying the same shit about about people from Michoacanos that they were saying about you growing up in the 60s. My mom went through a hell of a lot of racism in the 60s, and she's like, no, we're different. We come from a different stock. We're like blah blah blah. I'm like, oh man, the more thing, and in my mind, I'm like, again, if only the Republican Party was privy to these conversations, they wouldn't be saying the shit about, or they wouldn't allow the shit about Mexicans to be said by some of their members that they allow it.
Yeah. That's dope, man. Nice. I like that. It's similar, right, to the Jewish immigrants of the sort of early 20th century, right? The old German Jews who were the aristocrats, basically, and didn't just look down on the Yiddish-speaking Russian Jewish immigrants. They hated their guts and wanted them excluded from the country because they were an embarrassment to the race and we're holding them back. And of course, so I didn't know this about the intra-Mexican fights that go on, but it makes perfect sense. So tell me, can you do like, does the accents, does that make sense to you? Like there's such, because the accents they speak to, it's not just superficial. They speak to, I think, a real, sort of character of a culture. I think you do get a sense of, I mean, if Costa Ricans really do talk like that, that says a whole lot about the vibe. And Nicaraguans, which makes sense. I was like, I told the guys, like, and he said the same thing about Salvadorans, who Salvadorans are very serious and angry. And I'm like, well, in El Salvador and Nicaragua, they just went through like, pretty disgusting, horrible wars and, all kinds of bad stuff. So, what about, and it never occurred to me that the Mexican accent is sing-songy like that. Does that make sense? Yeah,
the sing-songy part, it's going to be more in central Mexico, and that actually comes from Nahua. It comes from the language of the Aztecs, which is lingua franca of all these indigenous cultures. So how can I can only do it as a Mexico City accent because that's where it's most pronounced. A todos los chavos de Nesa, ay no mames, güey, like na 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 na, like. And so like my parents, they didn't talk in that sing-song accent, but their Spanish was rural Spanish. So they didn't say sí, when they would say sí, which is yes, they wouldn't say sí, they'd say chi. And then of course you have, chi, like, ¿quieres comida? Do you want food? Chi, sí. And you also had a lot of elision, so you drop a lot of vowels. So you don't say para allá, like over there you say pa allá. That is very much rural Mexican Spanish, but language. Sadly, I don't do Ask a Mexican anymore. The column that got me so much notoriety. I always vowed that if no one cared about the column anymore, I would just turn it into a column about etymology because I'm just so fascinated by language. Like you said, what language says about us, about the people who sing it, the words or whatnot. And so the most famous dialect, if you will, in Mexico are people from Mexico City. Because it's like, again, it's urban. This is one of the biggest urban megalopolises in the world. Yeah. So, of course, you're going to have a language that's just gloriously fucked up with all sorts of lingo. There's a famous song called La Chilanga Banda by Café Tacuba. I'll send you the link afterwards. Café Tacuba being one of the great rock en español bands of all time. And the entire song is Mexico City slang. The nickname for La Chilanga Banda means Chilango band, Chilango being a nickname for somebody from Mexico City. And it's almost all words with the CH sound, like cha. Chilango, me voy a enchufar una chela, me voy a echar una chela is like, I'm going to drink a beer. Me voy a enchufar una chica, I'm going to go fuck a girl, which enchufar means like plug in, like you plug, vas a enchufar algo, like you just plug in something into like the wall. Well, in Chilangos, they turned into a sexual euphemism. And it's just such a glorious, crazy song. The rest of Mexico looks down on the Chilangos more so than people in rural America look down on New Yorkers. People in Mexico City are absolutely despised.
Yeah.
But they're some of the funniest fuckers on the planet, and their language is just glorious.
Yeah, I just, I've spent a little more time in Mexico in the last few years than before, and so and then I have a very good couple of friends who moved there, expats, who moved there and live in Michoacan, as a matter of fact. And
oh wow,
Michoacan's fascinating, and I've been thinking about spending some time there, and maybe even
What part of Michoacan?
So she lives in outside of Morelia.
Oh yeah, beautiful. Yeah,
but like way outside. So where where the monarch butterflies come down. It's like that's the eastern part of Michoacan. So it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's all
mountain. Yeah, no, Michoacan is just such a fascinating state because it's not as indigenous as Oaxaca, but you still have that indigenous folks, and you'll appreciate this. Those monarch, where the monarch butterflies end up, like they've had a lot of problems because these narcos are coming in and just cutting down all these logs. And so what ended up happening, the fucking Mexican government wasn't going to do anything. So these indigenous communities, and mostly women, they got chains, they got guns, and they're like, get the fuck out of here.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Let's talk about this because I learned about this because I hang out with anarchists. So they got very excited about. So let's do this. I love that we're talking about Mexican history. I did not intend this at all, but this is even better. So I found out from hanging out with these people in Mexico, these anarchist types, and from people from these, basically they're now like sovereign, independent little towns who are now independent from both the cartel and the government. It's an incredible movement people need to know about. There are towns, and many of them are Michoacan. I think other states too, but certainly in Michoacan. And I'm trying to remember the main town that's very famous for this. It'll come to me. But many towns are doing this where the cartel had come in and taken over and were stealing their stuff, usually trees from land or stealing just the land itself. And then, of course,
they're destroying their patrimony up there, which is the monarch butterflies, which is these logging, these trees. Like they're just stealing them. They're just destroying it.
Yeah, I'm talking about, but like in many towns, they would come in and just take over the forest, which is what people lived off of, And I found out that there's a very long history of antagonism and really civil war between the Purepecha, the tribe.
Purépechas, yeah.
Yeah, versus the Aztecs back in the day. That the Purepecha were the ones who, is this right? They were the only ones who didn't get conquered by the Aztecs.
They were not. They are very proud of that. I know a lot of Purepecha. In English, they got known as the Tarascan tribe, los Tarascos, but they call themselves Purepecha. Now that's what you call them these days.
Okay.
But yeah, the Spaniards ended up, of course, conquering them. The last group of indigenous folks to get conquered in Mexico were the Yaqui. And that they did not get conquered up in Sonora right up until the Mexican Revolution. They're the ones who held out the longest. But the Purepecha, they were, again, this goes back to, and I tell you, Michoacan being the Ozarks, you cannot conquer these people.
Yeah.
They do not like tyranny. They will fucking rebel at any chance possible. So the Purépechas are lionized in Mexico for being, for withstanding the Aztec hegemony, withstanding the Spaniards as much as possible. And to this day, still keeping a lot of their traditions, a lot of their food, their language, amazing people.
Yeah, it's totally amazing. And now I remember the name of the town that kicked this off, Charan, Cheran. I don't know if you about Charan. It's the cartels.
Yeah, Charan. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they'd come in and taken over the forest all around there, which was the source of people's livelihood, and they were cutting down trees illegally. And of course, the government just let them, or he probably participated in it, right? And the cops were just part of the whole process, is typical. And there's videos, people can watch this. People, please go look at Charan on YouTube. There's a whole bunch of good journalism on this, actually. Old women, like in their 50s and 60s, little old women were beating the shit out of guys from the cartel with like chains and like wrenches and hammers and smashing their cars. And they said, get the fuck out of our town. And by the way, and then they have a rule to this day. There are checkpoints. There's 2 entrances to Charan. There are checkpoints, military checkpoints by the town at each checkpoint. You are not allowed to enter that town if you are a member of a cartel or a member of a political party. Bam! Like, if you don't love that, and that was driven by these old women who threw down with these really scary guys, and they've been doing it ever since. Now it takes a whole lot of work, and they have to have town meetings all the damn time to decide everything. It's very democratic. But if you're into, first of all, taking on the big institutions, the big corrupt institutions in your country in a direct way like that, I mean, against all the odds, and this is a very small town, by the way, And then, maintaining that and remaining self-sufficient against the cartels and the Mexican government who run everything between them. I mean, it's just an amazing story down there. It's so inspiring. And then there's many other towns.
Yeah.
Toronto's just one. It's happening in many towns, especially Michoacan. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is, I mean, that's sort of what happened with Zapatismo, with Zapatistas in Chiapas, although that's more from a leftist perspective.
Right.
And what you see in Michoacan, it's not like, especially folks up here in the United States, activists, they lionize that. Chicano activists, they see that like, oh, self-autonomy and all that, but they try to put it more of a Marxist spin on it, even though it's not. Like, you talk to these people, we actually, when I was at the OC Weekly, I did a story. It was about Michoacan, but it was more in a place called La Tierra Caliente, which is going to be southern Michoacan and northern Guerrero, right on the Pacific coast. It's like it's a region of it. And there, they didn't have, there it wasn't as, how can I put this? It wasn't as woman-driven, for one, as what's going up in Cheran, and it wasn't as indigenous, because up in Cheran, that's going to be purépechas and all that.
Right.
But there you had, they called themselves autodefensas. So it was these, another great American immigrant story. Mexicanos who made their lives up in the United States, got working class jobs, owned their homes in the United States, but also in Mexico, saw their Mexican pueblos being overrun by these cartels. The government didn't do shit. So what did these folks do? They bought guns in the United States. They ran them down to Mexico. Their sons went down to Mexico. All right, Dad, I'm going to protect your lands for you. Get the hell out of here, cartels.
Man. Yeah, the autodefensa movement. There's that otherwise shitty documentary called Cartel Land. Have you seen that?
Nah, I don't see documentaries or cartels, because they're always the same. They almost always tell you the same sad, pathetic story.
It's about the town where that doctor who started them. I forget which town it is, and it's not in Michoacan. It's another state. But some town down there, that's what they did. They established these autodefensa militias essentially and kicked the cartels out. And then there's amazing footage of just like gun battles in the streets there. But the autodefensas won. And it's a remarkable story. And again, like, there is no Marxism, there is no socialism. It's just people protecting their homes and their villages and their towns.
Yeah, it's people, and especially, I think in Cheran it was more folks there is migration from Cheran into the United States, specifically about the defensas. Again, it's transnationalism, and it's these men, these families who made their life, they got their property, and they're like, no, I am not going to give up my property without a fight. Fuck this. I had to leave my country to make something of myself. The journalist Sam Quiñones, actually, who, by the way, is the greatest writer ever on Mexican migration and its effects on both Mexico and the United States.
Okay.
But he said that one of the big legacies of Mexican migration to the United States was, in the transformation of Mexico, is like, you had these Mexican migrants who left. They left because they did not want to be under an inefficient government, under a tyrannical government, frankly. They go up to the United States. They all start hustling. They're not asking for any handouts or whatever. So they learn in this country self-sufficiency. They learn, I can make money, and then they can learn, oh, wait, like, I also have rights. Like, they get sort of the rights, natural rights, or whatever, however the fuck you want to call it. And then they go back to Mexico. It's like, you know what? I'm going to try to change this country. I'm going to go back. And so during the 2000s, and you still have this day, but really during the 2000s, once Mexico changed its laws so that people outside of Mexico could also vote in elections, they start going back to Mexico and start running for the mayorships of their hometowns. Or, it's not technically a mayor. I guess so in some towns, mayors, but they start running. Or more importantly, with their money, they go to the Mexican government and say, look, you have not ever wanted to better our hometowns. But how about we raise some money and then you give us the rest? So it was called the 3-for-1 program, where like the immigrants, they would raise one part of the money, and then the government would match them on a federal level, a state level, and a local level. So that's how you had this transformation of all these rural towns. And so if you put in all this money, and then this is the days before the cartels really started blowing up. Now the cartels come in and say, okay, all this time that you spent, all this time and money and effort in your life trying to build up, we want it now? No, these people are going to say, fuck no. Like, I'm not going to go out of this without a fight.
And we got guns. We know how to shoot.
We got guns, exactly. Yeah.
We got good Good American guns.
Good American guns, a good old Mossberg 550. I mean, that would be a dream, just to be walking down like Omar from The Wire in your rancho and saying, whistling the farmer in the Dell and saying, "You stay away." But of course, those are the type of stories that we can't tell about Mexican migrants because, hey, it involves guns and it involves Mexicans getting mad at fellow Mexicans. Oh no, we can't say that.
But you know what though? As you were speaking, that story you just told about, these Mexicans going to America, getting guns and coming back home and defending their homes from the cartels and crooks and corrupt government officials. What narrative is that? You know what that narrative is? That's a Trump narrative. That's a Trump. That's a Trump supporter kind of narrative. Go tell that story. You should maybe do this. Go find some Trump rally or some group of Trumpers and tell them this story and ask them whose side they're on. They're going to love this. If they don't support those people doing that, they're not true to their own creed. A couple of weeks ago, I introduced you to a brand new, very exciting project, a startup company called Mantafly. It is an online open marketplace for beauticians who struggle with the licensing and regulation regime of the state. Alexandria Hatch is an amazing woman who has founded Mantafly, and she's looking for a team to help her do this. If you have any experience, and by the way, this is an agorist project, Alex is an agorist, and that's all I'm going to say on that. If you have any experience in startups, in app development, in PR and marketing, please go to mantafly.com, check out their website, and more importantly, contact Alex directly. She wants to hear from unregistered listeners who have already volunteered. 9 of you have reached out to Alex, and she already has a team working on making Mantafly into a project that is going to revolutionize the daily lives of countless, mostly women, mostly working class and poor women across the country who have such difficulty making a living, doing things like nails and hair, but they do it anyway despite what the state puts up against them. Email Alex at mantafly.com. You can also find her email address and the Mantafly URL in the description below. This is a project that Unregistered is fully behind. I hope it's a huge success, and if it is, I am going to be incredibly grateful to all the Unregistered listeners who have participated. So again, go to mantafly.com, or more importantly, email Alex at mantafly.com. Thanks so much.
I have been trying to tell that story throughout my entire career as a reporter. Though literally 20 years in Ask a Mexican, in my writing at the OC Weekly, even in the LA Times, getting there, working into that, just at the very least introduced to people, Mexicans are not the pathetic, the poor, pathetic sob stories that the American media wants to make them out to be. Right. No, we're humans. Let's just start with that radical concept. And then from there, let's really get into some of the things that Mexicans believe. First of all, different style of Mexicans. And then, the Mexicans that I could talk about the most is like my type of Mexicans, where my parents from, which are these rural Mexicans that, they would have been Republican if it wasn't for stupid Republicans in California talking all sorts of shit on illegal immigrants in the 1990s. And it's something, especially being in Orange County, which, was the epicenter for a lot of this. I'm like, guys, and it's always guys, you're doing this wrong. Pay attention to what I have to say. And they never did it. And that's why, historically, at least for the past decade, Republicans have faced as many problems as they have in California. And even with this whole phenomenon, now the American media is like, oh my God, how could Latinos possibly vote for Trump? Isn't Trump evil or whatnot? And I'm like, not for all Latinos, number one. Number two, not all Latinos are leftists. In fact, I would argue that most Latinos are not leftists. Yeah. That is the great myth. And that's a myth, though, by the way, that was self-propagated in many ways by Republicans. So it's all on them, man. If they don't want to, Reagan knew it better than anyone else, and W to a lesser extent. If you don't want to listen to them, that's on you folks.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you could have reformed the Republican Party and made them a majority party in California, Gustavo. You could have done this on your own, right? If they listened to you, right? I mean, that's kind of what you're saying, actually, isn't it?
I mean, I am now registered as a Democrat because I lost a bet in 2018, and if I make a bet, I don't know. Well, really quickly, the bet before that, I was always declined to state, and I voted I literally voted for whoever I thought was a better candidate. So I voted Libertarian, I voted Green, I voted Democrat, some Republican as well, depending on what it was. So in 2018, I go to the Laguna Woods Democrats. Laguna Woods being the senior community down here in Orange County, totally cool people. I mean, they're actually most of those folks are red diaper babies. So their parents were Jewish communists during the 1930s. So it's cool to talk to them. Like if we have really great conversations. So this was 2018. I said, okay, look, like I think the Republican Party or the Democrats, you're going to get some congressional seats in Orange County, but I don't think you'll get as many as you think you will. So tell you what, I'll register as a Democrat if you get a majority of the seats. Well, the Democrats swept all the damn congressional seats in Orange County. And I'm like, fuck, now I have to register as a Democrat. But I made a promise, especially those people. They've always been very kind to me. They've been great sources of stories. So we did this whole party. Hey, Gustavo's a Democrat. And not only is he a Democrat, he's a Laguna Woods Democrat. Nice. So all of that said, though, I'm still, and I told them, I'm going to be the worst Democrat you'll ever have because I'm going to talk a whole bunch of shit on the party. And I'm sometimes going to say stuff nice or not nice, but I'm going to give suggestions that Republicans might take and might win for them. So I'm going to be totally detrimental to Democrats. So I'm always going to side with what the truth is. I'm never going to be affiliated with any particular ideology or party. I'm just going to go with the truth. And that's the truth, that is a strain of conservatism, of libertarianism, more like it, especially among Mexicans, that the Republicans cannot the Republican Party this past generation has not been wanting to see, but I think now with Trump having won as many votes as he had, especially down in South Texas, now they're like, there might be something here. And the Democrats, of course, are like, no. I was actually it wasn't a debate. I mean, it was a conversation on some NPR station, and I was talking with a Latina, and we're talking about the Latino Trump vote, and she's like, who cares about them? Who cares? Like, the real story is how many Latinos voted for Democrats. I'm like, who cares? Famous last words. And she was so dismissive of these Latino Trumpers that I'm like, all right, I don't pay attention to what I'm saying. I've made a career out of being a Cassandra, or in Spanish, you can make it male. So Cassandro. I've been a Cassandro now for 20 years, and no one ever listens to me, both on the left and right, and I get proven right on many things again and again and again. So good luck with that.
Yeah, man. People should listen to you more. Certainly the Republicans. So what was that? Yeah, what did Trump get again for the Latino vote this time? It was huge. I mean, for him.
Here's the thing. It wasn't that huge. He actually, there's a guy, Gerardo Caldera. Yeah, Gerardo. I always want to say Gerardo, but because I have a cousin named Gerardo, but it's Geraldo. It's like Gerardo Cadava, a professor at Northwestern. He did a book about the history of Latinos and the Republican Party. It's a really, really good book. And of course, he got hated on by a lot of leftists saying, oh, how dare you write? But, I'm going to take his stance, which is Trump hit the historical number that Republicans, like the number that Republican presidential candidates historically get, which is about a third of the population of Latino voters. So he just basically did, well, that's the thing. You say amazing, and we'll get to that in a bit. Okay. He just did what he was supposed to do. But what makes it so amazing is, number one, he gained on his 2016 numbers. And number two, he gained that much even though he had to go through 4 years of people saying Trump is the worst thing that has happened to Latinos ever. Since, American imperialism policy. This guy is the devil. This guy is a vampire that's going to destroy your families. And so the fact that he got so many Latino voters for that, and like, to me, that's what's historic. That's what's such that should spell alarms, or, that should ring alarms. I always like to mix my metaphors. That should ring alarms to Democrats who really just went all in on a social justice campaign, figured that Latinos were just going to follow through, and they didn't. And so that is freaking them the hell out.
Let's say this again. Donald Trump increased his Latino vote since 2016 after being told 24/7 by everybody in this country that he is to Mexicans as Hitler was to Jews. Pretty much.
And worse. And worse. I mean, he was Cortez, Hitler,
Cortez.
Frito Bandito, all these horrible things rolled into one.
Right.
And a lot of Latinos like, I don't care. And it's fine. So I did the story of one of my columns for the Times. I profiled the guy, Randall Avila. He's the executive director of the Orange County GOP. So it was kind of a two-pronged story, but you said about how I try to go for stories that are national. So thank you for saying that. And for this one, what I cared about was like, okay, what's going to be harder for you, Randall? Is it going to be harder for you to turn Orange County blue or red again because the Republican Party suffered a historic wipeout in 2018? Right. Or is it going to be harder for you to be able to get Latinos to vote Republican? And actually he did both, by the way. Like, so the Republican Party did gain they gained 2 congressional seats back in Orange County, so kudos to them, even though I didn't like the candidates at all. But when it came to the Latinos, I mean, I just told his story. He is a Chicano, so his grandparents were Mexican immigrants. His parents grew up in East LA. His dad is still a security guard to this day. Wow. He had never cared at all. He had never even registered to vote until 2016, and then he did because he got excited about Trump. And for him, it was all about, hey, I'm a security guard. I'm Second Amendment guy. The Democratic Party, they want to take away my guns. No, his mom was, the way Randall described his mom, a little bit more liberal, but devout Catholic. So for her, it's all about abortion. And for her, like, I'm going to go for Trump, even though I don't like him, but he's going to defend, he's going to try to, scale back Roe v. Wade far more than the Democrats. So he did that. And that's where I introduced, something that's been, rumbling around in my mind for years, but I'm like, I got to put it out there to force myself to really flesh this out. But this term of rancho libertarianism, rancho being a village, villages in Mexico, so rural villages, and libertarianism. So I made this argument that, especially with Mexican Americans, there is always going to be this streak of independence. Forget the social conservatism, because that could happen anywhere, especially with the elites, whether they want to admit it or not. But in the small town, it's like, leave me alone. I want my guns. I want to say what I want to say. I want to believe what I want to believe. I don't need to be told that my old ways, that machismo is toxic, that I have to defend my cishet normality, whatever the hell cishet is. Leave me alone. Like, let me be, don't fence me in. So I did the story, and it's funny because a lot of people are like, whoa, I never thought of it this way, but you have something going on there. And then, of course, you have Democratic pollsters like, hell no, here's Gustavo again, trying to fuck with shit, making just these wild pronouncements. That's not true at all. And what ended up happening, of course, Trump ended up winning those counties down in South Texas, which are like these are the most Latino counties in the United States, 95% Latino. And everyone is just surprised. Oh my God, how did this could happen? But those of us who know, it's like, dude, the border, like, how 50% of the Border Patrol is Latino. And now I don't like the Border Patrol at all, but when you're a poor Texan down in South Texas and the Border Patrol could pay you good money and give you insurance, well, you're gonna lock in with them. And then you have a president like Trump who says, like, I love the Border Patrol when everyone else is calling you a sellout, a bandido, and trash. Well, of course you're not gonna go for Biden. You're gonna go for Trump.
Right. What is I'm sure there've been polls done that I just am ignorant of, but what's the general attitude among, let's say, second and third generation immigrants toward fresh immigrants?
Hell, one immigrant. I told you the story of my mom. Like, within one generation, my mom was like, no, not these Mexicans, only mine Mexicans. No, look, it's a traditional American story. We talked about the Jews from Germany versus the Jews from Poland or like from Eastern Europe, like this. So the more you're in this country, the more American you get, the more conservative you get, the less, and especially coming from immigrant stock, the less sympathetic you get to their causes. Like, I think with Mexicans in particular, there's always going to be a little bit more pangs of sympathy for them because you're not too far removed away from those immigrants. Mm-hmm. But to assume that all Latinos or especially all Mexicans are going to be open borders 100%. I wish, man. Imagine if all Mexicans were open border type people. Fuck, we could really take over this country. But that's not what it is. No, you got fucking Mexicans and weirdos saying like, oh, I don't want more people from the DF or Oaxaqueños or all the fucking racism that exists among Mexicans amongst ourselves towards other Mexicans. I wish we were open. I really wish we were as Aztlanistas as people made us out to be, but we're not.
The Reconquista? Is that what it's called?
The Reconquista, all that stuff. I mean, oh man, it would have been a beautiful thing if we actually, even if half of us believed in it, but we don't. Instead, we're too squabbling with trying to figure stuff out. And, there you go. That, again, one of my stock lines, who hates Mexicans more than Donald Trump? Mexicans.
Right.
It's sad, but it's true.
Is this true? So I didn't know the extent of this until I've been talking to you today. So there's a bunch of, what is it usually divided along? State, like geography, or is it class? There's probably all of these things, right? Color.
Yeah, it's all the things. I mean, colorism, of course, is a huge thing. The worst thing you could be in Mexico is to be indigenous. Indigenous, they're like the bottom of the bottom. And then after that, just like, color gradations. Like being Afro-Mexican in Mexico is actually better than being, indigenous, because Afro-Mexicans, their numbers are pretty low. In Mexican history, actually, you've had some Afro-Mexicans who were lionized, like what's the name, Guerrero, the namesake of Guerrero. He was one of the presidents of Mexico. He was Afro-Mexican. Like,
really?
you've had these heroes. Oh yeah, no, there's like this. I mean, there's still race. Don't get me wrong. There's racism towards Afro-Mexicans, but they're looked upon more fondly than they are like the current indigenous folks.
How did they get there? From
slavery?
Which, like, Belize? Like where? I mean, there wasn't black.
No. Directly to Mexico. I mean, we're talking about right during Hernan Cortez, once you start going into the mines. I mean, I know you know this, but most people don't know. Most of the slaves that came to the New World, they didn't end up in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
They were put into Latin America, Brazil, sure. And so Mexico is part of that legacy. So a lot of the slave trade, a lot of the slaves that came into Mexico, we're talking about the 16th century, 17th century, early on, worked towards death. And it's interesting. You want to talk about sort of the different gradations of like racism. Bartolomé de las Casas, the famous Spanish friar, he did this whole thing about in defense of the Indians, decrying how the Spaniards just ruthlessly murdered these indigenous folks and trying to say that they too are human. Well, he's like, his thing was like, let's not enslave Indians. Let's bring over black folks from Africa and let's make them slaves. So even our heroes are fucked up racist as American heroes are.
Just like ours, yeah. I did not know there was. I didn't know there was significant black slavery in Mexico, but I guess it makes sense. Why not?
Yeah, so today the last two, like the two main areas where you still have Afro-Mexicans is the state of Guerrero. So right next to La Tierra Caliente in southern Guerrero and northern Oaxaca, that's called La Costa Chica. So that's a big Afro-Mexican community. Huh. And then you have another Afro-Mexican community up in the state of Veracruz as well.
Huh. Fascinating. Does it make sense, or is it useful at all to talk about the differences between something that might be called Mexican American culture, if that even exists, and Mexican culture, if that even exists, because we're now sort of saying that there is no such thing as unified cultures in either country. But I mean, first of all, isn't it true that most Mexican immigrants to the United States come from mostly just a particular number of states?
Right? Well, historically,
more the North, right?
Yeah, I mean, historically from the North, in the past, I want to say 20 years, you've had more Mexicans from the South, more indigenous Mexicans, actually. You have huge now indigenous communities, like in Central California, especially. They're the ones who are doing most of the picking now. It's not like my family, which is, I'm not the darkest of people. My mom was super white, but that, those were the Mexicans coming up in the 50s through the 60s up until the 70s. Right. And now you're getting forward. And of course, now you don't have much Mexican migration at all. And the other important thing to remember about Mexican migration to the United States is that different Mexicans end up in different areas. So for instance, Southern California, you have a shitload of Mexicans from almost everywhere. Where you don't have Mexicans are from northern Mexico. Like we're talking about Sonora, Coahuila, the borderlands, basically. Right. The people from Sonora, they end up in Arizona. And then the people from like Chihuahua and like northern Mexico, they actually end up in Texas, like, El Paso, Houston, Dallas. Why? It's just, it makes geographic sense, the proximity. It's already, I mean, really, and you already have those pipelines in the past of migration, and you also have, honestly, just, it's the same culture. Tex-Mex culture is northern Mexico culture. The fajitas, the conjunto norteño, even like, the more conservative nature of that's just naturally to that area. But then you have like anomalies. So New York City, which historically people never assumed Mexican anything with New York City, Mexicans now make up, I think what was it? I think Mexicans outnumber Puerto Ricans. If not, they're the third number. No, they're huge. Mexico are huge. I've seen some forecasting showing that Mexicans will be the largest Latino group in New York City within 20 years, even beating Dominicans.
Damn.
And the majority of those Mexicans, they come from 2 states in Mexico, the state of Puebla and the state of Hidalgo. And like you have some people from Puebla in Southern California, but the epicenter of Poblano culture is in New York City. It is so Mexican that the nickname that people have for New York in Spanish is Puebla York. Instead of Nueva York, Puebla York.
Whoa. All right. So as I said, I've spent a little bit of time for the first time in my life in Mexico since you and I talked, actually. It's just been in the last
That's awesome,
years.
man.
Yeah. And let me just say, I fell in love with it. As a gringo tourist in, the nice parts, although, I did a bit of touring in not so nice parts, but I went crazy over it and like wept on the plane coming home because I didn't want to leave. Again, this is tourists.
What a fucking white guy, man.
Yeah, I know. Seriously, right? We're all up in our feelings.
Pinche gabacho.
Seriously. I felt like, again, could be absolutely projection of my own romantic fantasies, blah, blah, blah. I'm kind of checking this with you. And this is why I asked about the difference between Mexican American culture and Mexican culture. I see a stark difference. So I grew up, of course, in California. I grew up around Mexican Americans my whole life. I've known hundreds and hundreds of them, right? Yeah. And lived in LA for a long time. So I was, very, very familiar with Mexican American culture. Mexican culture, I wasn't familiar until I started spending a little time down there. They just seem like night and day. It seems almost like the difference between Italians and Italian Americans or Irish and Irish Americans. And where I'm leaning here. Mexican, the people who I experienced in Mexico, and I'm talking about, mostly poor working class people. Am I being like racial essentialist or somehow condescending to say that there is a serenity in their culture that you don't find in America among anybody, including Mexican Americans? There seems like, and I gotta believe it's just Americans and Mexican Americans too are just so, they're like you and me. Oh yeah. We're just like constantly like going and churning and like anxious and like moving forward in this hyper capitalist economy, and we're all sort of hustling basically. And in Mexico, I don't feel that. I haven't spent really any time in Mexico City. But
that's a whole other universe there. That doesn't count as Mexico in a way.
I'm sure, yeah. And was it Chilangos? Is that the epithet?
Chilangos, yep, yeah, Chilangos.
And I know they're not liked. Chilangos are not liked in the rest of the country, right? Right.
There's a famous bumper sticker that goes "Haz patria, mata un chilango," which is be a patriot, go kill a chilango.
Jesus, damn.
We don't fuck around, man.
They hate Chilangos more than Alabamans hate New Yorkers. That's pretty scary.
Yeah.
And then the attitude about death, I love, and I just think it's so clearly superior to the way we deal with death. Does serenity does that sound right at all? Like am I onto something? Or
it's interesting. Yeah, no. I've never heard it described as serenity. Usually what you hear it as is fatalism. Like, you can't change life, so you're going to do it. But fatalism is just it's completely wrong and it's completely lame. Serenity, there's something to that. I would use a different word. It's more like there's it's not, and I would say it's not fatalism. We're not looking to die, even though we have a far easier relationship with death than Americans. Yeah. But we realize and you know what? It actually goes, because my dad's an alcoholic. He's been sober for 35 years. And it reminds me of the serenity prayer. It's like, God, grant me, accept whatever it is. I can't forget it. Obviously I'm not an alcoholic, supposedly, but it's like let me deal with the things I could deal with. Right. Have have peace with the things I cannot fix, and then the wisdom to know the difference. I always remember the wisdom to know the difference. So there is that part. It's like yeah, like there's some things, look, life is fucked. In Mexico, especially with the cartels, with the government, there's always got to be fucked. So what are you going to do? It actually reminds me more of Candide by Voltaire, you know, the great, hilarious novel.
Okay. Yeah.
Now we remember Pangloss. When we say Panglossian, it's always, it's a synonym for like, you're so clueless about the world, happy-go-lucky. Oh, we can't do anything. We can't do anything.
Yep.
And Pangloss is kind of like that through most of the book. But then at the end, there's this switch where he now all of a sudden he gets to, we must tend to our own gardens. We must tend to our own gardens. And I think that's the Mexican way of life. It's like, you got to take care of what's in front of you. You got to take care of what you can take care of in front of, period. There's some things, sorry, as much as you try, you're just not going to be able to take care of them. And every once in a while, we'll, you know, rise up and just start killing people like Mexican Revolution style or even autodefensas. But for the most part, like, you just can't deal with it. So what are you going to do? Are you going to whine about it? Are you going to talk about how you're so oppressed and like the system's against you and we just need this, and that? Or are you just going to live, you know, are you just going to live the life that you need to live and you're just going to defend to the death what you're able to scrap by? And what I would say, again, this gets people in trouble, but there is a dignity to scrapping and fighting away and not making excuses to your life. I mean, that, and this is where actually the whole idea for Rancho libertarianism for me came from, right? Because, and I'm going to write this whole manifesto about it like one day, but it's going to be big, like 5,000 words, because in many ways it's my life story. Because my political awakening was from the left. So I will always consider myself to be part of the left. I mean, in the past, I've considered myself left libertarian. Mm-hmm. And the libertarian part, though, comes from my parents who, again, my dad came in the trunk of a Chevy. My mom was picking fucking garlic when she was 9 years old. She had to drop out of school in 9th grade to work at a tomato factory. My dad dropped out of school in 4th grade in Mexico. But they came to this country, they bought their house, they paid off their mortgage a couple of years ago. And, you know, do they have the most savings in the world? No, but they have equity like crazy. That's like their thing. And they never once made an excuse in their life. They never once, and they experienced racism. I saw it, but for them, it's like, you got to fucking do it. And so that's really my life upbringing. So when I come from the left and I say, okay, look, I do agree there's systems that you have to fight. I do agree there's racism and oppression, and you should organize against them. But at the same time, you got to take your own personal responsibility and fight that shit on your own. And the most important thing, though, and this is where I always get in problems with, I've never once considered myself a victim of American society. My parents never once considered themselves victims. Far from it. They're like, okay, America is going to be fucked up. Mexico is going to be fucked up. Fuck it. We're going to do something and we're going to make something ourselves. And it's going to be, we're going to help other people. Yes. But at the end, it has to come from us. And if we can't do it, well, then that's on you. That's not on anyone else except you.
Yeah. And then building capital, financial, economic capital, right? Wealth.
It's interesting. Yeah. It's interesting because now you're seeing on the left, especially folks on the far left, they're realizing this. They're realizing that in this capitalist society, or just not even capitalist society in general, wealth comes from from owning property. Wealth comes from having your own space. Ownership. That, you know, in Mexico, wherever, you need ownership. So how can we get to ownership, and how can we, like, I have a friend of mine, he's a realtor, and he was actually a student of mine. I used to teach Chicano studies at Cal State Fullerton. Right. This guy loves money. He's actually a Mexican immigrant. He came to this country when he was 7 years old, his parents, all that. So he is a fucking hustler, but he's probably the only radical realtor I've ever met. And you meet most realtors, they're fucking the most fascist motherfuckers on the planet. They're evil people. Like like in the history of California, they have the realtors. They've actually been the genesis for a lot of the ills of the state, like, you know, housing discrimination, redlining, and all that comes from the realtors. But here he's a radical realtor, and what he says is like, nothing is more radical than owning your own property. Nothing is more radical than helping out. And he specializes. I mean, he takes pride in helping out not just immigrants, but like he has it on Instagram. It's Rock and Roll Realtor, I think it's on Instagram. But he'll do stories like, hey, I just helped out a single mom, Latina, 20-some years old. And in this time and age where people are saying like housing prices are too high, which they are too high, by the way, but it's like, this woman didn't make an excuse. She fucking hustled, and now she gets to own her own home. And for him, it's like, that's the most radical thing I could do.
Yep.
Ownership, absolute ownership, which is crazy because you're not, but I do, but now I'm seeing that coming more from the left, but historically you're not able to say that. Ownership is evil.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's it. And it's of course among African Americans, this has been the big debate for a long time. When the black nationalists and black conservatives came along, like always, but especially in the 1960s, and they were like, hey, here's the problem. And it's still the problem, by the way. We don't own a damn thing. We spend a lot of money, which means we have enough money, right? But we just spend it, and what they would say is on the white man's stuff. And so they've been preaching ever since, conservatives and nationalists, no, build your own institutions, create your own wealth. And once you do that, the white man is irrelevant, and he'll be coming asking you for a job. So, and that's what I see. I mean, of course, it's an immigrant story very much. Mexicans are not special in that way. I mean, this is what immigrants have always done, but it's, I love that. And it's heroic. I just get sad because I just find them to be so heroic. I'm sad that they had to spend such huge parts of their lives suffering. So, just doing work that I couldn't imagine doing. Right. I mean,
yeah, you just got to grind though. I mean, would my parents have better jobs than they did? Yeah. But I mean, they'll even themselves, like my dad always says, and he's a smart guy. He's like, I could have had a better job. He ended up being a truck driver. He retired a couple of years ago, and it's, he made good money, but it's hard work. He's like, I wish I would have stayed in school, but I was too much of a hothead when I was young to stay in school. And my dad told me hey, you could either go to school, I could pay for you to go to school in the village, in the rancho, the other village along the way, or you could just take care of cows alongside with me. And so my dad chose to take care of cows, and he regretted that all that time. But because it's America, all 4 of his children have master's degrees, and I'm the black sheep in the family, man. I'm the only one without a government job.
Oh shit! Well, that's why you're cool. Okay, wow. They've all got jobs. And okay, to finish this line of inquiry here, and this is so anecdotal, it's almost embarrassing, but because I don't know the history, unfortunately, even though I am a historian of the United States. I was in Texas also for the first time recently, a couple times. I was in Austin, and I noticed what seemed to be several Mexican families, just Mexicans in general, who looked and acted like old money. Old American money, but Mexican. So I would guess that my guess is they were ranchers before the takeover, back in the early 19th century. My guess is they were ranchers in Texas, circa 1800 or whatever. And this is the lineage. And for whatever reason, they didn't get expropriated. But do you know that history? I mean, it's there.
Yeah.
I was enthralled because growing up in California, you don't see that. It's like Mexicans are overwhelmingly working and middle class, and that's about it. You just don't see old money like that, right, for a lot of reasons, right? But in Texas, am I right that it's a thing in Texas? There's old money Mexicans?
Yeah, and I mean, you even have some of them in California, wherever the American Southwest is, you do have old money Mexicans. Some of them in Texas, for instance, some of the families more in San Antonio, which is not too far away from Austin, they go back to the 1700s, to the people who literally founded the Alamo and all the things. Yeah. The real old money is New Mexico, where you have Mexicans going back there to the 1600s. Whoa. 1600s, especially in northern Mexico, and they still own the land, they still own the water rights, and they are very, very proud of that. Too often when we talk about the Chicano movement, we mostly focus on California and the Chicano studies, and also Texas, but we rarely talk about New Mexico. And some of the most radical people were up in northern Mexico. Reyes Lopez Tijerina, him and his supporters, they were going after the American government because they're saying, look, we have the title deeds to our family's land going back to the 1600s. We want our land back. We've been farming it, but we don't own it. So they actually took over courthouses. He ended up becoming a Pentecostal minister later on. So he was always a little bit too messianic for everyone's taste, but at least they were fighting about these things, because for them, it's like, this is our land. This is our money. This is who we are. We believe in it. We're going to fight for it one way or another. But also especially in Austin and Texas, what you do have more so than in California is you have Mexican money from Mexico. A lot of people fleeing the cartels, especially in Dallas and Houston. You get a lot of people from Monterrey, Nuevo León, and El Paso. And El Paso is mostly people from Juarez, but taking their money up there. But yeah, look, again, Mexican history, Chicano history in the United States, it's far more nuanced, far more in depth than what the media, even to this day, still offers, which are we're immigrants, we're pathetic, we're sad sacks, we deserve sympathy, or we deserve sympathy. Pity. Yeah, that's the word. We deserve pity, and there's no way on earth we could possibly uplift ourselves. So whenever we have a chance to tell an uplifting story, let's tell it, because it's just so feel good. And look, those good Mexicans, one of them made something of themselves. Good for them. Fuck that shit.
I mean, it's funny, like, to think of Mexicans as deserving of pity. It's like, I don't know, maybe that's just because I'm from California, but I mean, if you grow up around them, it's like these are the biggest badasses we have. I mean, these people work like motherfuckers like all the time, and they do shit that is just remarkable. It's so difficult, and and they don't even, half of them don't even speak the damn language. I can't even imagine like going to another country where I don't speak the language and I have to dig ditches for a living. I mean, what's in a sense more
that's courage.
It's courage, and it's also what's more American in the sort of the classical mythological sense, right? I mean, my gosh, not deserving of pity. All right, so let's talk about politics, current politics a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, first of all, soften me up again about COVID and the immigrant experience with it. I mean, honestly, I've been so pissed off at just the government officials and their stupidity and hypocrisy and what it has done to our cities, which includes a lot of Mexicans. And I mean, West Coast cities.
Yeah.
LA and San Francisco are ghost towns. They're destroyed. They're horrible. It's not worth going to. I mean, I would tell no one to visit now. And so I've been focused on that, but yeah, immigrants, not just Mexicans, not just Latinos, but immigrants generally are occupying positions in society where they are most exposed, right? Where they're most vulnerable to catching the virus. They're also the most vulnerable to the damn lockdowns, right? Because that's the little stores that they, scrape together all their savings through incredible hard work, and my God, and coming over in the trunks of cars and crawling under pipes and whatever it took, swimming across the river, wetbacks, getting shut down. So just speak to that a bit. Like, what's from the front lines? You've been interviewing these people, you've been experiencing it, like you've seen it. Like, God damn it.
Yeah, no, I mean, first and foremost, it's real. For anyone who doesn't believe it's real, go talk to someone who has survived it, or worse, whose family members have passed away. My aunt recently got coronavirus, and she's in her late 60s, but she didn't have diabetes. She wasn't obese. She worked out all the time, and now her breathing is wrecked for the rest of her life. So that's first and foremost. And the entire family got COVID. And by the way, these were people who she wasn't going out anywhere. Very few. They did everything that they were supposed to do, and they still got it. So it could get us. It's a fucking virus. Viruses are very interesting things, and let's leave it at that. But then just real world reality, well, not all of us have that luxury of being able to stay at home and do nothing. Some of us are essential workers, so you have to go out there and work. And then if you're not an essential worker, if the government says you're not an essential worker, so therefore your office, your business has to shut down, well, who's going to come and rescue you? The government's not going to come and rescue you. So now you're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to work. Where it hits the most for me has been the restaurant industry. My wife owns a market and deli in downtown Santa Ana. So I did a story for the Los Angeles Times about this past Wednesday. This past Wednesday, right before Thanksgiving, was the last day before restaurants in LA County could not allow in-person dining for a minimum of 3 weeks. And they say a minimum, but we know it's going to go longer. Right. So I decided to do a story. I love to drive and I love road trip stories. So this one was a very LA, I started in East LA on Cesar Chavez, which used to be Brooklyn Avenue back in the days, back when Jews used to live in East LA. Right. Then it turned into Cesar Chavez once it became Mexican. So I went from Cesar Chavez down to Olympic Boulevard. Olympic Boulevard is also in East LA, then takes you through Koreatown. And then from Koreatown, I took Normandy, which goes down through South LA, through the cities of Gardena and Torrance, end up in Long Beach. And then from Wilmington, which is a port city, then took another street to get me to downtown Long Beach. And the whole thing was okay, let's talk to people on the last day before And they all say they're going to be ruined. And they said, because people can say government officials, well, people can still go and eat takeout. And as one person told me, it's like, yeah, they can go get takeout. They're going to want to take takeout, but it doesn't replicate what we offer, which is you go to a restaurant to escape life for about an hour. And if you take something home, then if it's not brilliant, then you're going to think to yourself, well, I can make this at home, so why do I have to go to this restaurant anymore? And all these restaurateurs, by the way, that I profiled, they said, look, these numbers are going up. Our staff, we don't want them to get sick, so we understand why the shutdown's happening, but our big problem is that the government doesn't know what the fuck they're doing. They're just throwing things against the wall, and more importantly, they've never once come to us to talk to us and say, hey, how could we figure something else? I interviewed Bricia Lopez, her family. You want to talk about an amazing story. Yeah. Her family runs a restaurant called Guelaguetza, which basically introduced food from the state of Oaxaca to the United States. And Mexico, even in Mexico, Oaxacan food is known as the best Mexican food.
That's a big deal. This was the first restaurant to do that? That's a big
One
deal.
of the first ones. They're the first ones to make it, give it the renown that it now has today. They a couple of years ago, they made it into they got America's Best, which is from the James Beard Foundation, which is basically the Oscars of the food world. And this was like a Hall of Fame award for Guelaguetza.
It's amazing. What's the name of the restaurant? And again?
Guelaguetza. I'll spell it out. Guela, Guetza. Guelaguetza.
And where is it?
It's in Los Angeles.
What part?
So Koreatown. Only in America. Sorry. Let me finish this damn story, Thad.
Gotcha.
So Lopez family creates Guelaguetza, this amazing Oaxacan restaurant in Koreatown. Then they move in the early 2000s to a huge building which looks like a Korean temple, because that was the first ever Korean restaurant in Los Angeles. So a pioneer of Mexican cooking occupies a place where you had history making. So beloved family in Los Angeles, great, amazing food. So since the pandemic happened, they had to lay off half of their staff. But they're hustling. So they're like, they have not allowed in-person dining. So they have a driveway. They turned it into this beautiful patio, and now they had to close this down. And so this time there wasn't going to be any layoff, but everyone's hours were going to be cut by at least 2/3. And that's just best case scenario. So Bricia, she's one of the daughters of the founders. At one point, she pointed to the door at Guelaguetza. And, in LA County, you infamously have letter grades for all the restaurants. So she's like, look, I have an A for my health code here. Why can't I get an A for coronavirus stuff? I've done everything that they've asked me to do. We have not had a single case among workers or among employees here. And part of my my column also was I was dining at all these restaurants just so I could say okay, let's see how really good they are at this stuff. And they did everything that they were supposed to do. The food was fucking amazing. But it pains me to see in Orange County, it's been a little bit more lenient, but it pains me to see all these entrepreneurs being fucked over just because the government at first couldn't control coronavirus when we could have. And then once it was spreading around, has never really offered any plan forward. So what I try to do with my stories is, first and foremost, show there is pain and suffering. Yes, there is on the physiological level, but on the economic level, oh man, people are just suffering like crazy, and they want and these people, by the way, they do say oh, we need help from the government, but it's actually Bricia. This didn't make it into the story, but Bricia, and I just couldn't work it in just because it didn't work. But she's like, you know what? I don't trust the government anymore. I don't. They have not helped me out at all. I just have to do this on my own. We have to do it on our own. We have to hustle on our own. Right. And if you're an entrepreneur, you kind of have that already. But now, so more than ever, these people want to work. These people want to be safe for their clientele, and they want to pay their employees, because they also know and I only talk to the owners. I talk to some employees that they're like, yeah, we're basically, it's going to be hard times, and that's putting it very, very nicely.
So rancho libertarianism is going to save the day. Has to save the day. It's all they have.
It absolutely has to. Okay. And because that's the only way forward. I mean, we'll see what happens with the Biden administration, but at the very least with Trump, you had some sort of money, but at the end you cannot depend on these grants to save you. And frankly, once the pandemic happened, and you did not think this is going to be the worst year ever, and I have to plan for it that way, and then this second wave happens and these shutdowns happen again, and part of it, I hate to say, but part of it's on you for not planning for that also.
Yeah. So what's your policy position on the pandemic? What should be done by the government?
Where to fucking start, right? Let's just stay with where we're at right now.
Okay.
Damn, I got to think of this now.
Good.
The big problem I have, if you try to put a mandate, people do not follow mandates. People do not follow mandates at all. And it's that old Americanism, like, you're not going to tell me what to do. So you as a government need to at least tell people, no, it's not a matter of like, we're dictating. It's that if we do it together, whether mask or, protocol or whatever, it's going to save more lives and we won't have to be in this shit again and again and again. Okay. I think, and frankly, I'll talk specifically about restaurants and also businesses. Like, if you're a business, look, this is what we've learned from our official CDC or whatever. This is what we go. Let's just be safe, but keep open, be safe, have your protocols, whatever. If you violate them, we're going to find the fuck out of you. That's when we'll shut you down. But you have to be a violator. So these restaurants like a Guelaguetza, who has done everything right, we're going to support you. Stay open. You know your business better than we do. You also want to be in business. The last thing you want to be known is be a vector for this pandemic. You don't want to be known as that place. Yeah. Because there are some places are now that place. So we're going to support those. And for those of you who do fuck it up, well, then, we'll do whatever needs to be done, fine you, close you down for a couple of weeks until you actually fucking get it. Because here's the thing, whether you want to believe, or whether folks want to believe it or not, when you're out there, especially if there's a lot of people together, there's a higher chance. Are you necessarily going to get it? No, that's not going to happen. It's not 100% positive. So you want to guard it as much as possible. And frankly, I'm Catholic, so I believe in shame. I still have not seen a government official. I mean, I'm sorry, Newsom, he's not, he has his whole namsy-pamsy saying, but I'm actually going to do a whole column about it very soon. But you basically have to say, look, fuckers, what the fuck's wrong with you? Why are you going around pretending this doesn't exist? Don't be a fucking moron. Don't be a Huntington Beecher, for crying out loud. The best political commentary on trutherism with coronavirus were those YouTube stars, Chad and JT, when they did this. I don't know if you saw that video. No? Oh, man, it's great. It's legit funny. So Chad and JT, they've actually been around in Southern California for a couple of years. They go to like Hermosa Beach or Redondo Beach, and they say, like, we want the city to pass a pro-party ordinance because we believe in party. This is like in the pre-pandemic days. So they did this video about where they go to Huntington Beach, and they're like, and they're total surfer dudes. They're actually from Orange County, from San Clemente. So the surfer shtick is real. And they go to Huntington Beach like, hey guys, like, we heard there's a mask shortage in Huntington Beach, and we're here to solve the mask shortage. Here, let me give you a mask. And oh man, all these people, first of all, just get the gift of a mask. Just say, oh, thanks. I'm going to, I'll use it later. Then just walk away. No, they're coughing on poor Chad and JT, and they never break character. They're like, oh, dude, bro. Like, all right, cool. That's cool, man. Yeah. Like, they're such nice people as it is.
Right.
We can't be like, I mean, we need shame. We need to shame people into wearing it. And Chad and JT, I seriously doubt anyone in Huntington Beach gave a damn about them. But I think that's what the government needs to do. You need these officials to say, don't be stupid. No sean pendejos. Believe in this. And it's not just about you. And especially, by the way, if you care so much about the liberty of these restaurants to keep open and whatnot, well, part of that liberty is to make sure that these restaurants don't close because you infect one of them. So if you have any symptoms, you take care of them. If you're so pro-business, then take care of those businesses. I mean, because by the way, the person who gets most fucked over in all this, as usual, the businesses, entrepreneurs, and the workers, they're the ones who get screwed over more than anyone.
And no one cares. No one cares about small businesses.
And no one cares.
No one cares.
They never do.
I mean, they care a lot because that's where they shop for their very favorite things. We love small businesses more than anything because that's where the best stuff is, generally speaking, I mean, in many cases, right? Especially at the higher end, right? Ask a Californian, a wealthy Californian, would you rather shop at, a fancy, expensive department store, or would you rather shop at the cool boutique,
Yeah.
But but the thing is, though, I mean, outdoor masking clearly is stupid, right? Right? Again, this. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
And this is the thing, though, that these government, and this most recent one, they're putting this mandate saying that oh, we need to ban outdoor dining, and they don't give a single study. Now, there's been studies that show that coronavirus spreads indoors where there's no ventilation.
Sure.
There's been studies that show that there's been studies that coronavirus spreads, in restaurants with no ventilation.
Sure.
None of these government officials have been able to show that coronavirus can spread if people are spread enough. But still, they're like, nope, we're just going to do this blanket thing, and that itself is preposterous, But then, so it's interesting because in my column, so I'm going into Long Beach, and I'm like, you know what? Fuck these shutdowns. This is all stupid. Whatever. Like, we should just keep them all open. And then I pass through 2nd Street, Long Beach. 2nd Street, Long Beach is like a rich version of what do you call it? Floribama, or that whole area, that really, I mean, it's really like white trash, but rich white trash. And there you have all these people not wearing masks, talking like nothing, and they're outside, mind you, yes, but they're like going from table to table, and the poor fucking workers are all masked up and all that. And for me, I'm like, you guys don't care about these workers. You only care about your own hedonism, and you folks are the ones who fuck it up. So that, and then I ended up at this great restaurant in Long Beach called Michael's on Naples, and the chef there, like, great Italian food, awesome Negronis, by the way, a whole Negroni program.
I love Negronis.
Like a fucking libertine right now instead of libertarian. Fucking amazing Negronis. And so the chef, Michael, he's like, he's like, I'm going to have to lay off my entire staff today for the 2nd time this year. And it's because of those people on 2nd Street. I mean, he's angry at the government. Don't get me wrong. But it's like those people on 2nd Street in Long Beach, they're the ones who are messing it up for the rest of us who do it right. They're the ones who don't care at all about anything. Here I am caring. How can the government rightfully treat me? And he's a chef. He's not the owner, but my team. How could they treat us the same way as those people out there? And then and at the end, he's like, it's not even the restaurant owners are tolerating that to a certain extent, but it's really these these consumers who don't give a shit about that. And those consumers, by the way, are not going into Michael's. And it's funny because at the end, I was leaving, and some woman comes in. And it's funny because I go in and they immediately say, you have to sanitize your hands. I'm like, all right, fine, I'll do it. Then some other woman comes in and she's like, I don't have to sanitize my hands. I already sanitized them earlier. And the poor 22-year-old hostess, she's like, she had to be very polite. But in my mind, I'm like, you're so fucking selfish. Just follow what the poor woman tells you to do. You're already going to spend $100 and some bucks. The least you could do is fucking sanitize your damn hands.
Yeah. I mean, I got no problem with masking and doing the sanitizing hands indoors in people's businesses. First of all, it's their business, it's their property. I have to follow the rules. No problem. And I get it. And especially if there are old people there and vulnerable people there, or people who live in close quarters, like a lot of immigrants do. It's mostly not the national, it's the outdoor mask stuff, the culture of it, getting shamed for it. I mean, I just think it's absurd. But, and then also the lockdowns, the universal lockdowns, when we know there are very specific populations who are really vulnerable, who should be protected, right? For sure. But to just shut down everything it's disastrous for especially the poor and the working class. It's a massive transfer of wealth upward. Who's benefited more from the lockdowns than anybody else in the world? Jeff Bezos has benefited more from anybody in the world, right?
Not only that, I mean, here in California, there was a study recently, the state of California, mind you, the budget, we were facing doom and gloom. And it turned out, actually, we made a pretty good cent during this pandemic because of our tech billionaires making all this fucking money going upward. So It's funny. So now they're like, oh, wow, California is not as doomed economically as a state, as federal, as a government as it was. I'm like, okay, but that's seeing the burrito for that's not seeing the burrito for the beans, man, because the rest of us, especially the entrepreneurs, they're just destroyed, absolutely destroyed. Yeah. It's hard with these lockdowns. I think, again, it's these government officials who, I mean, we already went through it this first time around. Now, it's not as draconian as it was this first time, but I think it could just be rolled out far, far easier, in a way, if you are going to do these lockdowns, do it in a way that's not going to harm people as much, when it comes to especially making a livelihood, frankly. And again, I really think a long way goes with, and also don't get caught in hypocrisy. Gavin Newsom, I really think he might have lost his re-election campaign with his whole French Laundry bullshit. Because people just do not like hypocrisy like that. At least Trump, say what you will about Trump, but from the very beginning, he's like, yeah, this isn't real. I'm just going to wear this mask just for the fuck of it, for show. So, so he wasn't going to convince anyone by wearing anything. People knew he was a cretin to begin with. But Newsom, you made yourself out to be holier than thou, and now you're caught at the French Laundry without a mask, and then you have to quarantine yourself because your kids are going to school, which, by the way, you're telling schools you shouldn't gather in. Like, come on, man. No te hagas, as we say. Don't make yourself out to be someone that you're not.
Wow. Yeah, Gavin Newsom. So I recently returned home. I was living in Oregon, and I had not lived in the Bay Area, in California, in a long time. Well, not in the Bay Area, and I came back here, and here's this goddamn handsome dipshit mayor than governor of my state, and then he basically locks down my whole life in society. So I had a little bit of a bone to pick with Gavin. And then the hypocrisy around that French Laundry thing. To me, the important thing when Nancy Pelosi does this and Gavin Newsom does it, they all do it. Andrew Cuomo's done it, right? It's not the hypocrisy, although that is totally infuriating, and I get that. It's that they don't believe their own so-called science, right? If they really believe this thing was so dangerous, I mean, that's to me that's what they're saying to me. And they're getting flooded by, expert opinion on this and scientific opinion, but they don't believe their own science, apparently, right? I mean, that's to me.
Walk the walk. That's to me the epitome of hypocrisy. Like, if you're gonna say, don't get your hair done without wearing a mask, by the way, Nancy Pelosi was not wearing a mask. Don't dine inside with people outside of your immediate pod. If you're saying that because science says that's going to spread it, number one, don't do it. Number two, do not be caught doing that. It's stupid. It's stupid. I mean, that's the best way to put it. It's just fucking stupid.
I did not know Gavin's history until I came back here because I had no reason to. About
little Lord Fauntleroy, man.
Woo! It is so like old school corrupt. It's ridiculous. So Gordon Getty, for those who don't know, right? Wealthiest family in San Francisco, the most powerful family in San Francisco for generations and generations. Getty Oil is the source of their wealth, and I think a lot of other things. And Gordon Getty is the current patriarch, and he's arguably the most powerful Californian there is, certainly one of them. And as a young man, when Gavin Newsom was a young man, he basically chose Gavin Newsom as his project. And he has funded not just Gavin Newsom's political career, he's bought that dude some of the wealthiest real estate in the state to live in. I mean, houses in Marin County, the most expensive home in all of Sacramento is owned by Gavin Newsom, paid for by Gordon Getty. Yeah, look it up. It's amazing. His whole history of real estate, where he's lived in houses that he cannot afford with his own salary, with his own income. And the Gettys and the other rich families and the Pritzkers and the Fishers have also given him tons of money. Willie Brown, of all people, who was his mentor, essentially, he said publicly just a couple of years ago, he said, the reason Gavin is where he is because the wealthy families of San Francisco chose him as their boy. And it's, I actually pity the guy a little bit, because if that's what your whole career, all of your fame, all of your popularity is based on these rich people choosing you and funding you to that degree, you got to have a little bit of like a doubt about your own self-worth, I would think. But anyway, I can't stand the fucker because of this. And I just have so little respect for him, and especially for the families who put him there. So anyway, that's kind of a side story about the corrupt California politics. We're as corrupt as Chicago, and just in different ways. I mean, what do you think? What do you think of Gavin? What do you think of Gavin?
I always thought he was smarmy and sanctimonious.
Yeah.
I never really had an issue with him, though, until this mask thing. Like, I think his handling of the coronavirus, for the most part, I mean, again, you're going into something that people told us was going to be this horrific pandemic, and maybe it hasn't been as deadly as the Spanish flu, but it's definitely fucked up a shitload of stuff, economically or whatever. So, it's an unenviable task. I think for the most part, California, like, he has the right ideas in terms of, like, we got to get more testing, we got to, protect folks or whatever, but he threw all of that. I cannot respect. Well, you know what? I'm an opinion columnist now, so I can give my opinion. Back in the days, I couldn't, but I cannot respect them anymore after that. It is just, you cannot do that. You're making a mockery out of all of us who have done everything right, out of all those small businesses who, despite mortgaging their futures and destroying their own careers and their lifelines, are doing it. You're making a mockery of those people who have gotten coronavirus, and like that first family, the Gonzalez family that I did for my first column, who did everything right, whose lives had to give up their business of 30 some years that made them a success story in the United States. You mocked it all by going out to eat for that. No one, how can you look at us Californians with a straight face and tell us anything about coronavirus for that matter? Yeah, you could apologize all you want, but then that flies in the face of what you've made yourself out to be, which is this grand bulwark against the evils of Trump. We here in California, we do the California way, the right way, until you think that no one's watching, and then we don't. It's like, it's pathetic. No. It's pathetic.
And all we do is we arrange all the laws in this state to favor the wealthy. I mean, that's very clear, especially in San Francisco.
And then my wife, who's off to the side, she made a great point. And on top of this, it'd be one thing. He'd get more sympathy if, like, oh, they caught him like eating tacos at a stand at 3 a.m. No, he did at the French Laundry with French Laundry. Thomas Keller, elite of elite of elite. Thank you, honey.
I think it's the most expensive restaurant in the state, and it's ridiculous. All right. Awesome. Thank you for hating Gavin Newsom with me. Although you might actually hate him more than I do a little bit. I kind of pity the guy. Again, I feel sorry for him. You know, it's more the power behind him that I really despise. But no,
I mean, if you're going to see him as a puppet, like, look, this is not. Come on, even the fucking robots in Westworld eventually realize they have some agency and break from their masters. We're not seeing it right now.
No, I feel you. No, I'm basically with you. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I take it back. I'm not pissed off at him or Gordon Getty. I'm pissed off at all of the millions of liberals who love him, who think he's just so awesome and so for the common people. He's the man of the common people. Nah. He grew up in wealth. He was given more wealth. It's just insane. Now, one more topic I want to get into with you. So Prop 16, yes, would have basically overturned, was it 209?
Yeah, 209.
In the 90s, yeah, which made it illegal for the state to use race and gender, et cetera, in hiring and admissions. And now they tried Prop 16 was an attempt to overthrow that, or what's it called, repeal that, reverse it, and it was wiped out by the voters, lost in a landslide. What's your, I mean, I read your columns on it, and I've read your columns on affirmative action, generally speaking, and it seems as if you are not, it sounds like you're not like gung-ho pro-affirmative action,
no.
but you are more favorable than not, is that correct?
Here's my thing with affirmative action. And this is never going to happen, by the way. I wish it was based on class. I think that I'd rather, if you want to diversify your student body, get a poor white kid who grew up in Menifee, Menifee's middle class, Colton, California, very, very working class. Poor white kid who's going to be the first in his family to go to college. He or she is more deserving to go get affirmative action than, say, a third generation Mexican American whose family runs a supermarket empire. Because the way it is with affirmative action right now, no, it's all about race and it's all about gender or whatnot. Mm-hmm. And so but that's never going to happen because this country will never see class as a defining issue instead of race, even though class is really, I mean, it's mixed in with race, but class more than anything.
That's right.
That said, I have never seen the doom and gloom about affirmative action, maybe because I'm a Mexican and I could be a beneficiary of it. The way that Ward Connerly, who was an author of Prop 209 and came back out of retirement, he moved to Idaho because he didn't like California anymore. Wow. But he came back to make sure Prop 16 won, and so kudos to him for that. But I just never seen that doom and gloom of that. So at the end, I'm like, well, if you're going to get more people who should be, I mean, because think about it, when it comes to affirmative action, you're most likely, if you're going to be getting students who are not getting the highest GPA, who are not coming from the most socioeconomic distinguished background. So yeah, I want more of those people at the community college level. That said, is affirmative action, was it the most gripping issue for me in this election? not even close. Like at the end when I did the column, and I talked a lot about my sort of my ambivalence toward it. Like it's just not, and the funny thing, of course, because I try to do this, I also said that the reason Prop 16 was losing as much as it was frankly because of Latinos like myself who didn't think affirmative action, don't see it as really a Latino issue, because our entire lives we were just told to work your ass off and you'll be able to make something happen out of it. And that's still how I believe to this day, most of it.
Rancho libertarianism right there.
Rancho libertarianism, all right there. Yeah.
Okay, but you still favor it, you still support it
at the end. I still,
even if it's based on quote race.
Even if it's based on race, again, because the beneficiary to it are going to be people who have historically not gone to a college. Although, then again, it's funny because one of the big critiques of affirmative action has actually come from the Chicano left, and they say, you know, who's the biggest beneficiary of affirmative action? White women. White women are like historically the biggest. So, I would say I favor it, but almost.
What about?
¿Cómo se dice? Not again. You can see the ambivalence in me. Like, I'm just gonna favor it again more than anything. I'm gonna favor it because it pisses off alt losers. So there you go. That's the only reason I'm gonna favor affirmative action. That's it. But that said, if we could dismantle it, go ahead.
No, yeah, I was gonna say. So, what do you think about the mismatch thesis? You know, Richard Sander at UCLA has done a bunch of good work on this, showing that people who, I think he mostly looked at blacks, but it doesn't matter, would apply here too, to Mexicans. Shows that people who, through affirmative action, get placed into places like Harvard and Yale, do really badly, and they end up doing much better at second or third tier schools because they're not prepared. That's the whole point, right? They get plucked out of a ghetto Compton school where they were the best student in the high school, but it was still Compton High School, and so they just simply don't have the training that kids from Harvard Westlake do, but that's who they're in class with at Harvard University, and they just can't do it. They just can't do the organic chemistry, like the kids from Harvard Westlake could. And so, I mean, to me, that's maybe the most devastating critique of affirmative action I've ever heard. And he's got the evidence.
It's definitely a thing. It's definitely a thing. Let's not pretend that's not true. I mean, hell, you even see it from the left where people say, like, look, I went to school my entire life, all Mexicans. Now all of a sudden I'm in these corridors of whiteness where I do not know how to hang. So I need help from the school just on a psychological level. We're not even getting to the school level. Yeah. I frankly think, though, hey, baptism by fire. Let's put these kids in. The ones who really are able to succeed, those are the ones we really want. We really want to make them happen, and we really want to support people like that. Of course, I don't know. I still think I'm just skeptical of siloing all of our best and brightest together. I really think that you need to, and I say this, by the way, as somebody who was siloed. When I was young, in fourth grade, my parents were told, hey, your kid's gifted and talented, so we're going to put him in something called GATE, gifted and talented education. Right. So all of a sudden, I went from a school where it was all Mexican to a school that was more white and Asian. And I did fine. I mean, I got my grades up and whatever, but I always hated those nerds. And mind you, I am nerd supreme, but I always call myself a political nerd and a sociological nerd more than that. Yeah. But I didn't like the kids, and not that I ever felt inferior to them, by the way. If anything, more than anything, I'm like, oh, this is what we're supposed to live up to. We're supposed to be rich in society, and just knowing these kids, like, they came from fucked up families, they came from like horrible parents and all that. I'm like, these are and they were good. I mean, it's funny because you see them on Facebook now. Oh man, life has not treated them well. Let's just leave it at that. And I feel for them because I remember them as sixth graders, as sweet kids. The whole world's ahead of us, and they should have had the entire world ahead of them because they had the money that my parents didn't. And so by the time I got to high school, I actually requested to get taken out of honors classes. But I also got kicked out of my honors classes because I just did not like the nerds around me. So I would never bully them, mind you, but I would always talk back to the teachers and get kicked out of that. So I think it's fine that let's put kids from like small little schools in like Brawley, California, which is out in the desert. Let's put them in Harvard, and let's give them the support system, because these rich kids, they deserve to know these people, and because otherwise we're segregating ourselves by class. Again, going back to class, like, why should only working class kids go to Cal States? Like I've taught, yeah, let's just stick to Cal States. Cal States being a public college, almost anyone could get there. Why should it only be working class kids who are working 3 to 4 jobs? Like, why shouldn't rich kids also be down there and learn? Frankly, like, this is a true hustle. And we talked about this off air, but I'm a teacher at a community college. So, and I love teaching, and I've taught. And I love community college students because you get the entire world going in through there. But, I've also taught at the Cal State system, the UC system, and also private colleges. My best students were the one I've taught journalism. I've also taught Chicano studies, mostly history classes, oral histories, and all that. My best students were always the students at Cal State Fullerton, because they had to pay more money than community college, so they couldn't just easily drop out. They were working 3 to 4 jobs. They valued that. No one ever gave them an even break. They definitely were not. They're not the type of people who were born on third base and thought they hit a triple. They have never even been up to bat yet in this game, but they're fucking making it happen. Conversely, the worst students I ever taught were at the UC system. I'm not going to say what particular program or school that I taught at, but these were kids, and it wasn't all white kids, by the way. It was a very diverse class. But these were the kids who were told their entire life, you are brilliant, you are smart, you have the grades, you were in Glee Club and ASP, and you got your 3.9 GPA, and now you're here, and now you get to rule the world. Nice kids, but so entitled, did not want to do the hard work. No, they could have learned a lot in life by being put in with these kids who are working class and like taught, like, hey, life's not easy. Do not succumb with that. So again, but this goes back to class. I'll say this. I'll still be opposed to affirmative action if it's based on race. Okay. That's why I'm ambivalent, just because so often race is so intermixed with class. So I know when we're getting kids with affirmative action, we are getting these poor kids for the most part who have never had that chance in life. And it sucks that, sink or swim, because it does happen to a lot of people. But we need those kids also to be mixed. We need kids like myself to have gone to college with the Gavin Newsoms of the world. If we're able to be there, maybe we'd have put some sense into him,
Yeah. Well, then again, you don't have the money of Gordon Getty yet. So once you get that,
exactly.
Then you can do it. It's all about capital accumulation, right? By minorities. And then you become, it doesn't matter that you're a minority. Man, Gustavo, you are so much fun to talk to. This has been a blast, and I've learned so much, as I always do. I think I learned more this time than even from our first one, which I quote our first episode all the time to people. I tell.
Oh, no way, man.
Oh yeah, I tell them about your whole childhood.
That's so cool.
and being, raised in the barrio by like extended family and neighbors and friends, and I always say, this is the way. It's so much better. I talk about your childhood all the time, dude. Like probably weekly. I'm not kidding.
You're kind and creepy too, but whatever.
Hey,
no, thanks, man.
Talk about your childhood. I don't talk about how cute you were when you were a child. I just talk about your childhood. Thank you, dude. This has been amazing. You're really fun, and we got to go eat tacos sometime.
Dude, for sure, man. No, I mean, sooner rather than later. And inevitably, really quickly, I'm going to get a bunch of people who have never heard of me before, but because I was on your podcast, have heard of me, are going to look me up and just totally be a fan. So for those of you who support Thad's podcast, thank you. And hey, let's talk. More than anything, I love to have conversations with folks. I am not an ideologue. I love to talk, and follow me on Instagram and all that shit, and my newsletter and all that shit. But fuck yeah.
Yeah. So wait, do you have a website?
Go to GustavoArellano.org. And what I would recommend to people, if you like anything I had to say today, I have a weekly newsletter where I compile everything that I've written for the week. So all my columns, all my media appearances, obviously when this podcast comes out, I'll put it out there. And then I just do a missive, a random missive. I'm actually right after. This might have been an indirect inspiration. Shortly after I appeared on your podcast, that's when I started the newsletter, because it's what you said stuck with me, and I really wanted to do it, but I just couldn't pull the gun at the time. But I'm like, you know what? In the meanwhile, let me just do this newsletter. And it's taken off a whole life of its own.
Hell yeah.
It's been great. And so I'll write my little thing. Sometimes I'll do original journalism just for the hell of it.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, GustavoArellano.org. That's the best way to just keep up with me.
I think I was pushing you to go independent, right? Is that what I was doing?
Yeah, you said I was going to go independent, and you were definitely pushing me. And I still reserve that right, by the way. And just like I said in that newsletter, look, I am a company soldier. The LA Times has treated me very nice. My editor, Hector Becerra, awesome man. And by the way, then this, we didn't even talk about media, but I'll say this really quick. I am a reporter. That's not a real job. What my parents did was a real job. And me and Hector, we talk about this all the time. His parents were working class Mexican immigrants from East LA. And look, we really believe in our profession. We're proud of what we do. But at the end, we're like, you know what? What we do is a luxury. What we do to tell these stories as part of the MSM. Yeah. Real work is, going out and being an entrepreneur. Like my wife does. She's an entrepreneur, small businesswoman, owns everything she has. She has the courage to go out there. Me, I'm a coward. I like to go get a paycheck, but maybe one day I'll get those cojones and do something.
Yeah. You get some cojones, and so you can be both. Right. Which is what I'm about. That's what I'm doing. I'm doing both. So you can do it, man. Thanks for coming on. You're the best. I hope to see you at a taco stand sometime in the near future. And we might have some business to do together, right? We were talking about maybe some Renegade University teaching, perhaps.
Details to come, as we say. Details to come.
Indeed, my brother. Thank you, dude. I will see you soon. Thanks for coming.
All right, man.
Have a good one.
For sure.
All right. Bye-bye. This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. To join the new Renegade University, go to renegadeuniversity.com. To join the new Unregistered Underground, the supporting listeners group for the podcast, go to unregisteredunderground.com. Thanks for listening.